Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing on with the same video from Donny, but we're getting into some fresh topics now. No more Jupiter. First, we'll take a quick look at a video of a certain star that Donny thinks is a Stargate because it has most of the same issues his fake Jupiter had in part 1. So if you haven't seen part 1 and you feel like I'm missing something about the star, it's probably because I already talked about it before. After the star, we're going to change it up completely and start talking about buildings on the moon.
There's no telling what dwells up there. Could be fallen ones, you know? These fallen ones need a body to stay in our physical reality, so they probably have synthetics made that they can possess. And once they possess those bodies, where do you think they're going to stay? They look different than us. They're going to end up having to stay on the moon or somewhere else. I know that sounds crazy or paranoid or whatever, but you have to start thinking with an open mind, a broader mind. Start thinking what was used to be science fiction is now science fact.
I like that you take it as a given that there are creatures from outside physical reality, and they probably possess synthetic bodies. And the only real question here is whether the buildings on the moon are theirs or someone else's. Gotta say, I'm very interested in the evidence that led you to those first couple conclusions, but for now we'll stick to the moon buildings. So as Donny likes to say,
hold on to your butts. Okay, let's start off here. Here's a still of Cirrus.
Cirrus? I've never heard of Cirrus. I better look that up. Infrared cirrus are filamentary structures seen in space that emit infrared light. Huh. Nope. In biology, a cirrus is a long, thin structure in an animal similar to a tentacle, but generally lacking the tentacle's strength, flexibility, thickness, and sensitivity. Gross. I like my tentacles thick and sensitive. Cirrus and Achenar are the sons of Atris and Catherine and are the eldest of their 3 children. No, well, maybe. No. Wait, I know. Did you mean Sirius? Why didn't you just say so?
Here's a still of Cirrus, like you see most people film.
Lousy with purple fringing? Okay, that's not really fair. I mean, you are way closer to in focus than you were last time, so I should be positive here. And achieving perfect focus isn't always so easy, and being just a little out of focus can cause color fringing like that. And I'm sure your low-end achromatic refractor telescope isn't preventing that as well as it could. A much more expensive apochromatic refractor might do better, but it's still not going to be perfect. But either way, there's no need for you to invest money in an apochromatic refractor trying to solve this problem. It's not necessarily so bad that it'd be worth it, for one thing, but more importantly, because this is a problem with refractors but not reflectors, you could just use your reflecting telescope that you already have, and that wouldn't cause the issue in the first place.
Now this is Cirrus with only 1/4 of the amount that my telescope zooms, okay?
Your telescope doesn't zoom, Donny.
And I show video format of all of this. These are just stills of the video, okay? So there's Cirrus without really zooming in far.
Or at all, even.
Here's me taking it a step further.
Oh, Donny.
Yes, Papa?
No, we're not doing that again. But you really do think your focus knob is a zoom, don't you? That is incredible.
And the oceans of the firmament were totally flickering across this picture of this video of Cirrus.
The oceans of the atmosphere, you mean? You know, Donny, I think it's about time I explain something to you that either you consistently forget or that you've somehow never thought about. I touched on it before, but let's get into it a bit more. And that is the fairly obvious fact that we don't live in an empty void. Not by a long shot. In fact, essentially, we live in a big ol' ocean full of thick, ripply, wavy, annoying air that obscures viewing really badly, even if you're just looking at things relatively close by on Earth with a zoom lens or a telescope. It's gonna bend the light any number of ways you don't want. Every astrophotographer constantly fights the battle for good seeing, good viewing conditions through the thick, turbulent air of the atmosphere, because different densities of air redirect light, just like a lens does. And because this problem comes up whenever you look through a whole lot of air, it's not just a problem for astrophotographers. For example, it's a big problem for long-range shooters, except for them it's even worse because they tend to be shooting across a lot of ground, which can cause severe mirage when it's warm. You're no different from them, except maybe in the fact that you don't care enough to worry about it, and you'd rather use it to form the world's dumbest conspiracy theories. But if you cared about the truth, you would quickly figure out from your own observations that even in the absence of some visible object directly obscuring your view, you do not have a perfectly clear view of space or anything else. Take your telescope, look at something far away on Earth on a hot day, and you'll start to see the problem. Anyway, if you ever decide you actually want to get good at astrophotography, just accept that seeing conditions are something you're going to have to work around and try to shoot on a good night. You can use this site to get a forecast. So as all this applies to the star itself, the reason you're seeing that flicker and wobble is the same reason a shooter sees the target do that. When you look through enough air, the temperature and density of all that atmosphere you have to look through is constantly changing, like a big distorted lens that changes from moment to moment, so the appearance of of whatever you look at is going to change too. Even on days with great seeing, if you look at individual stars, they're still going to flicker because you're still looking through a lot of atmosphere at a very, very small point light source. If we lived in a vacuum, you might have a point that is caused by something between us and it that we're not immersed in, an ocean firmament or whatever other guess you might have. But luckily, that's just not the case. If we lived in a vacuum, we wouldn't be alive. So you have no reason at all to put this forth as an explanation for the mystery because there's no mystery in the first place. So you sound more than a little silly doing it. It's weird that despite doing this for, years? Somehow you still haven't figured out that photography is not just a simplistic matter of point, click, and see raw, unfiltered reality. It's not even close. What you're actually dealing with when you take a picture is an ultra-complex system of light, atmosphere, lenses, sensors, and everything that can interact or interfere with any of those. And because of that complexity, it shouldn't surprise you that sometimes weird stuff happens. And it should make you extremely skeptical of whether the odd things you see through all that madness are an accurate representation of the object you're looking at, or whether it's a camera or telescope issue you can fix, or a result of the physical behavior of light as it travels through all those different objects and substances. And this is why learning just a bit about optics and the fundamentals of photography is so important before you attempt advanced tasks like astrophotography. And it's also why it's so handy to read about and experiment with your specific equipment to find out its limitations and quirks if you don't already know them. Because doing all of that provides you with the tools to understand what you're seeing and why you're seeing it. Just buying a telescope or a camera doesn't automatically mean you know how it works. So now let's take a quick look at Sirius to see what's different about it from your fake Jupiter, and then we'll move on to something more interesting. So we've already talked about the green color, the rings, and it being out of focus.
Do not get on my channel and tell me I'm out of focus, because you're just pulling shit out of your ass.
Yeah, well, turn the focus knob and prove it then, dingus. So the only thing that's really new here is the shape. It could be a bit of astigmatism in your lens, that's pretty typical with achromatic refractor scopes like yours, and of course it gets to be more of a problem the cheaper they are. When you were pretty well in focus, it wasn't very noticeable, but it's really noticeable now that you're badly out of focus. That's why testing lenses for aberrations like this is done by defocusing while looking at stars. It's called star testing. This particular lens defect speaks to me personally. When I was making some test videos for part 1, I saw something very similar. For example, this video I took with my scope from across the room of a power indicator on my lamp. You see how when it's out of focus it makes a perfect circle? Well, when I was looking through the eyepiece to line up this shot before I put my webcam on it, I saw a shape much more like what you're seeing here. A little worse even. And the reason is I was taking off my astigmatism correcting glasses to take a look. When I put my glasses back on and looked again, it was a perfect circle. That's kind of fun. I wish I could show you, but I'm not a cyborg yet, so my eyes don't record video. By the way, if anyone out there is suffering with headaches and tired eyes and difficulty concentrating and there doesn't seem to be any good reason, consider getting yourself checked for astigmatism, even if you can see really well. Before I got my glasses, I had 20/20 vision because my muscles were compensating for the problem so well, but that constant tension in my muscles was the cause of all the pain and misery. Anyway, this distortion might be a permanent imperfection in your lens, or just a temporary result of it cooling down in the evening air. I don't know, that's for you to figure out, but again, you'd probably just be better off using your Power Seeker telescope. I would guess that has a lot better optics than your cheapo Meade here.
Then we get into some amazing moon footage. Oh my god. So the waters above are rippling crazy across Sirius. Then we get into moon footage. And it is no slouch.
Well, it's nowhere near as slouched as your other footage. Probably helps that it's a lot easier to take video of the moon than of planets and stars, just because it's so much bigger from our perspective. But that's not to say it doesn't slouch at all.
There is stuff all through here, guys. You can see, and I'm not saying just any moon footage. I'm talking about probably the clearest moon footage I've ever given you. High definition 2.7K. If you go to hit play on your video, hit the 3 dots in the upper right hand corner and change it to the highest resolution you can, because I'm sending it to you in at least 1080p.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Let me just go and seriously?
But I filmed it in 2.7K, and this is amazing stuff, guys. Look at this. You can see evidence of things up there that just are not craters.
I gotta admit, you're technically right. There's all kinds of non-crater stuff there. Specifically everything around the craters.
And I'm serious.
You mean you're serious?
Look at this stuff up here, guys. Look at this stuff up here.
Wow, yeah, that's some real nice blurry shadows there, Donnie. Congratulations.
I mean, I'm telling you guys, some of the clearest moon footage I've seen in a long time. On anywhere on YouTube.
Then you're not looking very hard. Looking at your video, I see a pretty major problem at a glance. Firstly, you have this blue ring around the edge, and at first I thought that might be atmospheric prismatic dispersion, the refraction of light as it passes through the atmosphere, putting red and blue fringing around the object. You wouldn't be able to do much about that, but that would put blue at the top and red at the bottom, and you're seeing the reverse, so that's definitely not what's happening here. We can be doubly sure because you have a clip of the color changing as you play with the focus. That shouldn't happen with atmospheric dispersion, so what you're seeing is chromatic aberration. That blue fringing around the outside edge, though, isn't really a problem. If that were the only problem, then the details that matter on the surface, like the craters, would still be fine. But the fringing is also present on those, and it's pretty bad.
Because I get the parts where you get the opposition of light.
Oh please. Everyone on YouTube who observes the moon has images with shadowy bits and light bits. That's kind of a given.
Oh my god, look at this up here. You mean to tell me that right there is not some type of bridge, and that is some type of building sitting right in the middle of that so-called crater?
Yes. I mean to tell you it's not that, and I'll show you why. So here's a photo of the moon. Actually, no, it's not a real photo, it's a prediction. This site shows the moon as it's going to appear for every hour, every day for the rest of 2019. For some fun, compare your moon footage with this each time you take it and see how well the shadows match. It's pretty impressive. That's the cool thing about science as opposed to the Bible. It lets you predict the future for real. You should look into it sometime. Anyway, the images of how the moon looked on February 11th, 2019 at 7 p.m. Florida time. Midnight on February 12th UTC. This is around when you filmed Fake Jupiter. So let me just mess with the levels until it looks all badly exposed and add a nasty blur. And you can see it starts to look very similar to your image. But let's not keep it like that because it's gross. Now I'll add in the same lines you added so you understand the correspondence. This image already has labels, but they're sideways now, makes it kind of hard to read. So I'll just slap on some labels of my own. And now let's take a look at Google Moon. Well, actually Google Earth with an overlay because I can get more labels that way, whatever. So let's look at what these craters look like from above. Sorry, what they tell us they look like from above. And then we'll figure out if that bridge and structure make any sense based on that. And if you're right, they shouldn't. You should not be able to make perfect sense of it by looking at craters from the top, because otherwise this is perfectly consistent with craters and you're saying it's not. So if we extend your bridge line, we can see that that goes roughly from the middle of the Lilius crater straight over to Simpelius, skirting the edges of Zach on one side and Pentland on the other. It's not really a single raised straight ridge, but thanks to all the low craters around it, it kind of ends up looking that way. The structure you circled is just before we reach Simpelius along that line. So it's in this raised area in the middle of all these Simpelius craters. So you were wrong about that, it's not right in the middle of a so-called crater at all. If you say they say it is, you're just flat out lying or not paying attention. Take your pick.
And that is some type of building sitting right in the middle of that so-called crater.
No, it's not in a crater, it's a higher area between some craters, obviously being lit more as a result. You took a blurry image of it with sloppy exposure settings, and then for some reason you decided that a random light bit must be a building, even though it shows absolutely no sign of being one. If you want to make up wild sci-fi explanations for moon craters, go nuts, but at least take a decent picture so your explanation is based on what's actually there. Now look, I know you're not going to believe me just because I showed you exactly what those lines correspond to in the satanic oppressor's imagery. So I'm going to tell you how you can see this for yourself. See, the nice thing about the moon is, even though you always see the same face of it, it's not exactly the same because it wobbles or librates. And that means on different days, you're going to see different parts near the edge that were previously obscured. So here's how the moon's predicted to look on April 18th at 9 p.m. Florida time. According to mooncalc.org, it's going to rise at 7:14 p.m. that day in Daytona Beach, just a little bit before sunset, so you're going to be able to see this with your telescope if you go out just a little bit after that. Take a look at it and find the same craters you were looking at on February 11th. Here they are marked for you with your lines and everything. And notice how at this point we're seeing way more past the Simpelius crater all the way over to Schomburger and beyond. And so now you can much more clearly see all those features you misidentified before. Notice the distinct lack of bridges or buildings. And also notice that the features along your lines match up perfectly to the light areas and shadows that you thought were bridges and buildings. But don't take demonic NASA's word for it. Get out your telescope like you do every other day and find out how wrong you are all by yourself.
These aren't craters. I don't think none of them are.
Oh, good. I don't think none of them are either. I think all of them are.
None of them.
Not even one? If shadows on uneven surfaces confuse you, fine, but your videos have tons of craters without those confusing shadows. And if they're not craters, what do you think they are?
That is definitely some type of structure right in there, guys.
You can't puzzle out how craters would make those shadows, therefore it's a structure because you feel like it. What makes any of what you just circled look like an intentionally built structure to you, Donny? Because aside from your own imagination, I'm gonna have to go with nothing. But either way, your inability or unwillingness to figure out how that spot corresponds to the craters around it doesn't mean that none of the craters on the moon are craters. Even if you found a whole city on the moon, that'd just mean there's a city on the moon, not that there are no moon craters. So the question remains, why don't you think any of them are craters? And if they're not craters, despite looking exactly like craters, then what are they? And how do you know?
And then look at all this stuff in here. Crazy, crazy stuff.
The fact that you accept that amount of chromatic aberration is pretty crazy. Aside from that, I have no clue what you think is crazy about this. It's just a bunch of bumpy land and shadows.
Let's get, there's a lot of awesome moon footage. There's this weird green light that comes up into the craters. Like that one day it was red, now it's green.
Yeah, that's crazy, and it's not even just a day-to-day change. For example, your clips show the craters with yellow and blue fringing when they're close to the top of the video, and they change to red and green fringed as the moon moves towards the bottom. What's going on there, you think? Are the colors of the lights on the moon coincidentally changing every time you reposition your telescope? Well, that'd be pretty silly to think, wouldn't it? So what else could it be? Well, assuming the moon is in focus, what you're seeing is just some chromatic aberration caused by the lenses in your telescope. Probably something you should learn about because you seem deeply confused every time it pops up. But I'm curious why you're seeing so much of it on these shots in particular, so let's figure that out. In your live stream where you showed off your telescopes, you showed off this little, what you call a travel scope.
I just got this. It's a travel scope. Look how little it is.
That's what everyone else calls a spotting scope. They're typically used for stuff like hunting or target shooting or bird watching. And you say that now, instead of using your power seeker telescope to look at the moon, this is what you use as your moon scope.
This little thing gets so close to the moon, it's crazy. And then I usually film the moon with this one until I got that new scope I just showed you, that travel scope.
And you sound super excited about how great its optics are.
It's got the best optics. It's got a compass in the thing here, but it's got the best optics. See how they're tinted?
That's great that it has coated lenses, Donny, that'll help cut down some reflection, but that doesn't mean it has great optics. What would? Well, if it had extra low dispersion or ED glass to help reduce chromatic aberration, or if it had an achromatic or even better apochromatic lens to, again, help reduce chromatic aberration, or if it had exceptionally precise lens manufacture to help reduce all kinds of aberrations. In other words, the quality of the optics is in the optics, not the coating on the optics, although of course that's important too. So the scope with the amazing optics is a Simmons Blazer scope with 20 to 60 times zoom and a 60mm objective lens. It's $60 at Walmart. Weirdly, you call it a 60 by 60 by 80?
The company is Simmons, and it's a travel scope 80mm. It's 60 by 60 by 80. Is the measurements.
Which makes no sense. 60 by 60 times magnification? What? And I've looked, but I haven't been able to find a trace anywhere of a Simmons scope with that appearance and an 80mm lens. I'm thinking that once again we just have a problem with you not knowing anything about your equipment, including what the numbers describing it actually mean. And by the way, unlike your other telescope, this scope does in fact zoom, because spotting scopes tend to have special zoom eyepieces. This goes hand in hand with their intended use. So at some point in that live stream, you tell one of your viewers that you only started seeing these mysterious red lights on the moon when you switched from using your Celestron scope for moon observation to using this one.
Donnie, have those red lights on the moon? No, I haven't before. No, with this new scope, I can see more color because of the atmospheric glass or tempered glass that's on both ends of the scope. It's like tinted, like sunglasses, kinda. And it takes down a lot of the glare, so I can see more true color. I've seen more true color with this scope in the past few days than I ever have with my big Celestron.
You've got that hilariously backwards. Your Celestron is a reflecting telescope. It shows you more true color than at least this particular telescope because it doesn't have cheap refractor optics that show you all this false color. In fact, chromatic aberration is the exact issue that prompted Isaac Newton to build the world's first working reflecting telescope. Now that's not at all to say that refractors are inherently worse than reflectors for all tasks, and of course there's been a lot of progress since the 17th century on refining lens manufacture to reduce this issue. But nonetheless, it remains an issue refractors have that reflectors just don't. Point being, you never would have seen color fringing, at least the type caused by chromatic aberration, until you switched over to a refractor like your spotting scope.
This little thing was under $100. It was like around $100. And I literally put this together and the camera that goes to it for $200. So it's not about money. It's about matching up the right stuff.
To an extent I agree, but it all really depends on what you're gonna do with it. That scope you have might be just fine for spotting a target downrange, but based on the quality of your moon video, maybe not so much for astrophotography. Especially if you're not gonna take the time to understand the flaws that come with the technology you have. See, the thing is, high-end telescopes aren't just expensive for no reason. The reason they get so expensive is they have expensive materials and designs and manufacturing processes all meant to solve exactly the problems you're dealing with because you're using cheap stuff. So no, it's not all about money. You can absolutely do hobbyist astrophotography on a budget, but if you spent more money, you'd probably see things more like they actually are in reality instead of getting all confused when you see all those aberrations caused by your cheap optics.
And that's what I'm here for, you guys. I have the ability to research this stuff, to purchase this stuff.
I really doubt any of Donny's fans are watching at this point, but just in case like one of you is, please don't rely on Donny's research for your purchasing decisions. Or anything else, but in this case, specifically purchasing decisions.
I actually got this sent to me from a camera shop. They saw what I've been doing on my channel. They sent this to me, not for free, but for a discounted rate. I haven't reached the status of getting free stuff yet. This little thing was under $100. It was like around $100.
So a camera shop liked your channel so much, they talked you into paying $100 for a scope Walmart has for $60. Yeah, they sound like big fans. By the way, this live stream is from January 30th. It's not like it's from a while back when the scope would have been more expensive. Anyway, Donny, by now you're probably protesting that I'm some lying shill for Satan. Which I am, but that's beside the point. No, my $60 garbage scope has perfect optics, guys. It'd never show me anything that wasn't really there. It loves me. There really are red and green lights on the moon. Funny you should say that, hypothetical Donny, because for part 3, I'm going to be addressing another video of yours involving moon footage, and that video seems to have prompted some criticism, which prompted you to make a lesson teaching people about photography.
Let's take a lesson in photography.
Which I think is the funniest thing I've heard you say so far. We'll get to the details the next time around, but I want to show you this. This is your footage, Donny. Are you seeing anything wrong? What are those lights on the leaves, Donny? Who's living on them, Donny? These aren't leaves. I don't think none of them are.
You know, it makes me wonder if it's showing red, green, and blue. Those are the 3 primary colors of video footage.
What's this? A hint of curiosity? A glimmer of thought? A guess at how it might actually work? That's great! Okay, yes, Donny, those are the 3 colors used to display images on a monitor, chosen based on how the human eye perceives color, but more generally, they're ranges of wavelengths of light, and light is the important thing here. Here's the visible light spectrum. When light passes through your lens, it's divided into this whole spectrum of colors. And that's why when you have chromatic aberration, depending on exactly what parts of that spectrum reach your eye based on what exact type of chromatic aberration your lens exhibits and what's been done to correct it, you might see violet, blue, green, yellow, orange, or red. Any color of the rainbow. You might see a mix of them, you might see all of them, or only 1 or 2 of them. Again, that's going to come down to the specifics of your lens.
Is this some type of holographic overlay? I don't know. It looks like the true texture of the moon to me.
Okay, Donny, why does this one look true and the normal one look false? By what standard have you determined this? Because to me, if you can look at some leaves across a field and they look the same, that's probably not the true color, that's your telescope screwing up the color. But okay, if this is some sort of holographic overlay, doesn't that mean it's a fake texture on top of the real one, not the real one on top of a fake one?
But there you can see reds. See the reds?
Yeah, I see the red. Seeing lots of red.
And you just saw greens in the craters, which is the 3 primary colors of video format.
Reds and greens, the 3 primary colors of video format. How do the yellow fringes factor into this 3-color hypothesis, Donny?
Or artificial color, or holographic color.
Look, it's, I guess, good that you're trying to come up with an explanation here. That shows a tiny bit of promise, maybe. But you're going about it all wrong. When the real explanation is so simple and so easy to test for yourself for $0, you should probably do that instead of just making up some wild conspiracy theory about the evil they who want to hide the holographic inhabited moon moon from you. Or if you're gonna do that, at least learn the explanations they propose for the phenomenon. Test them out, see if they work. If you're right, they won't work, because the moon really is a hologram, so you'll just end up proving that they're lying to you, right? And if you really do care about the truth like you claim to, and if their suggestions do work, then you've learned something about your equipment and about the world, and that's good. Of course, you already did test their explanation, if only accidentally, and I think the results speak for themselves. But you either didn't notice or you didn't care.
So they probably camouflage a lot of this stuff with like some type of holographic overlay.
Fine. Stay stupid if that's really who you want to be. Nobody's gonna stop you.
Here's a smaller scope size, but you can see more of the whole entire flat side of the half moon.
Do I even want to try to guess what you mean by flat side of the half moon? Nah.
Just some amazing clarity here, guys.
Is there? I mean, I guess aside from the aberration and the exposure problems, it's okay. Probably look better with a better scope.
There's so much cool stuff to see.
Yeah, there's a whole reptoid metropolis up there if you look hard enough. Awful place, dusty, terrible pizza.
I don't want to waste too much time on this part.
Oh, you already did. A long time back. But thanks.
I filmed a little spot of the sun traveling through the clouds as it was pushing off its incandescent light, or that neon blue light. This is what I was talking about. See the blue light it gives off? That's an artifact of a fake bulb. This is a fake light.
Donny, that's the sky. I cannot believe I just had to say that.
And it gives off signs of it all the time. That blue light right there is just like a fast flashlight would give if you put something close to it and shut the lights off in the house.
That blue light right there is just like the sky would give if you looked at the sky.
Serious, guys.
Why won't anyone take me serious?
There it is again. Again.
Whoa, the sun turned green?
Jupiter, just different parts of Jupiter. But in the video, like I said, I get past the focal point of the object of Jupiter and shine more on the light it projects. Because you can do that with a telescope.
Past the focal point. I don't think that term means what you, oh, whatever. You mean you can focus poorly with a telescope, and yeah, I don't know why you'd want to, but you sure can.
Just like when I'm filming the moon, I can focus on the surface, or I can focus on the little atmosphere, because the moon does have little clouds.
No.
If you don't believe me, ask anyone that films the moon.
I did. They said you're full of shit.
Serious.
I'm super serious.
Anyone that has a decent P900, P1000, or a telescope that films the moon. Any less than that, you're not going to get close enough and see.
Yeah, telescopes. I asked the kind of people who not only use telescopes, but actually know how they work. They said you're full of shit.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to diss anyone's equipment. I started off on stuff that was mediocre compared to the stuff I have now. You graduate as you move. You know?
The fact that you consider that cheap toy of a spotting scope a graduation from a Celestron PowerSeeker 127 EQ is just... it's something.
Every time I was getting a gift, or Christmas, birthday, people say, what you want? I'd say a new piece for my camera, a new telescope, you know?
Did you ever ask for a beginner's book on photography? Probably should have worried about the basics before all the upgrades.
I'm not rich by any means. I finance stuff. I'm still financing my last flying camera right now. It probably won't be paid off till the summer. It's too expensive. I'm a working schmo, 9 to 5, just like you guys.
How relatable. I'm a YouTuber. I work 2 hours a month and spend the rest of my time flying out to cons to get sucked off by whichever adoring fan wants to pay for the privilege. I'm not relatable in the least, but at least I'm right. Learn some basics before you finance your next camera, Donny. And before you spend another evening pretending to be an astrophotographer.
Okay, here's where the projection of Jupiter, I started to zoom in on the projection and started to do really weird things. Look at this, guys. The video speaks volumes.
It sure does. That's why I had to speak even more volumes about it.
The oceans of the firmament were really extreme tonight. There was all kinds of amoebas in the oceans, and I picked it up with the light of Jupiter in Sirius. It is truly amazing. The video is no slouch.
I don't think I've ever seen a video slouch that bad.
Here's me catching a water spout from the last part of sunrise, which was shot this morning.
Pretty. Hey, at least I like your drone videos, right? Well, the ones where you're not trying to prove the sun is fake.
That's about it, guys. I'm telling you, please stay tuned for the rest of the video format. It is truly amazing. I'm not gonna lie to you. It is the best of mine this year. hold on to your butts.
We're definitely not sticking around for the rest of the video format, but I will be back for more. In part 3, we'll finally get to the claim that blew my mind even more than these ones, even though it's a lot simpler. At least with the stuff we've gone through so far, I can maybe understand how someone might be confused if they took a solid knock to the head first, but not with the next one. So Donny, I hope something I've said here can help you fix up your image problems and take some better video in the future. As for your willingness to believe the moon is a demon city covered by a hologram just because you took some flawed video, that I can't help with. So everyone, thank you so much for watching up to this point, and I hope you'll come back and join me for the amazing conclusion. If you like this part, give it a like and subscribe, and if you want to support more stuff like this, consider supporting the channel on Patreon like all these great people, or visit support.logicked.com for more options. Oh, and the 2 hours a month thing, that was a joke. Yeah, definitely a joke. We'll see ya!